So we're going to start now the second shir on the seventh hagaha. Okay, we're on Amud Yud, the paragraph beginning Ubir ha'inyan. Let's go straight in, and we'll talk about the inyanim as they come up. Ubir ha'inyan srichim levai b'ktsara inyan hakelim da'atzilus. So in order to understand our project here of understanding the spheres of Atzilus, we first need to understand, at least b'derech katsara, what is the concept of the kelim of Atzilus? How do we categorize and identify the kelim of Atzilus? Because if you remember from the Siman Chaf of Igeres HaKodesh, the question at the beginning, how can it be Ihu v'gamu ichad, when the kelim are the inyan of gvul and the inyan of gvul b'tachlis. So the question is, how can the kelim, as kelim mukbalim, be associated with the Ein Sof, which is bli gvul? How can it be chad ima bli gvul? We have a general principle that an inyan bli gvuli is not able to be mislabish in an inyan gvuli. A kli gvuli is not able to contain an inyan which is bli gvul. So if the kelim are mukbul, how are they able to contain the Ein Sof? And to the extent that they're iyu v'gamui chad, they become chad with it. How does bli gvul and gvul have that type of chibur and yichud? That was our question in Siman Chaf, and that is sort of our question now too. There are two opinions. Whether the kelim are also identified as Atzilus, as Elikus, or they themselves are briyas yesh ma'ayin. And as such, they're not the same as the Eiros of Atzilus. So he says here to give beis shittas. There are many more shittas, but here is introducing them as two shittas, and it's like in a lot of it. This is all explained at length in the famous Maim of the Tzemach Tzedek, which is called Drush Gimel shittas. Okay, but here we have two shittas, which is going to express the shitta of the Ma'areches and the shitta of the Rekanti. The shitta of the Rekanti will come later. That will be already the Omajid base, and that's not what we're going to do today. Today we're just going to present what he says is the shit of the Ma'areches. Now, the Ma'areches is a sefer called Ma'areches Elikus. This is in one of the early Sifri Kabbalah. We do not know exactly who the author was. There's a claim that the author was a certain Rabbeinu Peretz. Some people wanted to say that this Rabbeinu Peretz was the Rabbeinu Peretz HaKohen, the teacher of the Rivash, who was Machabed, but that's unlikely. There's probably another person in Makubal called Rabbeinu Peretz, maybe. It's very unclear. The moment, let's just leave it, we don't know. That's why we refer to it as the Ma'areches. We call it by its name. We're not sure who the author is. So the shit of the Ma'areches is as follows. Shehakelim hein bechinas Atzilus. That the kelim are in fact indeed associated with the Eiros, associated with Atzilus. How's that? V'ushniskale bechinas koyach hakomus v'chosum mehakoyach el hapoyel. So the kelim are merely a realization, a revelation, an unfurling, an unfolding of a koyach comes, hidden koyach. So it's helem el agilu. It's not bri yesh ma'ayin. Not something that didn't exist prior to it and was invented, created, but rather it's something which it existed in a helem dika form. And in that helem dika form ultimately was niskala, and that was niskala the kelim.
What does comes literally mean?
Hidden. The Einze is chadshus gemura. So it's not something which is like bria. The bria nikris chadshus. Why? Why is bria called his chadshus? The the reason why is because the actual Matthias of Yesh did not exist in the Mokkah. In the Mokkah it was Ayin. It was Bittul. And it's only through the act of Bria that it becomes a Yesh out of that Ayin. So it's a novel thing. It's creating something novel and new. Something that wasn't there prior to it. Umasha Nasa Matthias Yesh. How is it over Chodesh? That there should be a thing that has a sense of selfhood, has a sense of Yeshus and distinctiveness other than its Mokkah. That is a Chiddush. Because in the Mokkah, there wasn't any awareness of anything other than Elikus. So Masha Ein came by Atzilus. She'einem b'chinas Yesh. So in Atzilus, there is still this inyan of Bittul and Dveikus to the Mokkah. And it's not b'chinas Yesh. Chas v'shalom. Kim koiches Elikus shaya behelem v'nisgalim in a helem el agilu. Rather, everything that unfolds in Olam Atzilus were koiches of Elikus that were also there previously. And it's just a matter of helem el agilu, not his chadshus yesh ma'ayin. Okay? So, included in that are the kelim. The kelim are also part of that gilui hahelem, and they are not his chadshus yesh ma'ayin. The chayda tzarich lahavin. So, 1 second. You might want to say that it isn't yesh, but it's definitely gvul. The kelim are the inyan of gvul in Atzilus. We talk about this, these distances. We put a number to it. We identify a sense of gvul to the Olam of Atzilus. So how is that bechinas gvul? Uva Atzilus ain't a shaykh leima gvul. When you're talking about the concept of Atzilus, when you're talking about when he says Atzilus here, he means inyan of Elikus. Ein shaykh leim gvul. Shaitzilus shekoyach hamatzel benetzel v'hamatzel ein nigda beged hagvul chas v'shon. When we say Atzilus, the term Atzilus is distinct from the inyan of Bria. Why is Elam Atzilus called Atzilus? Elam Habriya called Elam Habriya. Elam Habriya is Bria Shemaim. Like the famous Ramban, that the term Bria only applies to creating something Shemaim. So Bria is very specifically using that term. Atzilus is also very specific. When we say Atzilus, we're talking about how something, in English you would say emanates. So emanates mihelem el agilu. Shekoyach hamatzil benetza. That what was the matzil, that the originator of Elam HaAtzilus is present in the netzah. And since the matzil is not beged the gvul, then how can the netzal be beged the gvul? If you're going to call the kelim of Atzilus, then you've got a problem. Because you're claiming on the one hand that the matzil, the bli gvul, is present in the netzal. On the other hand, you're talking about kelim, which are also bechinas gvul. So the two things don't seem to be compatible. So that's the question. Yeah? Which is fundamentally the same question at the beginning of Simcha. So the explanation of the concept is as follows. So according to the Ma'areches, the way you'd explain this is that when we talk about gvul in Atzilus, the gvul of the kelim, we're not talking about gvul in the same sense we talk about gvul in Elam Biyah. The gvul of Elam Atzilus is relative. It's a relative notion to say that it's gvul. But it's not the real notion of gvul. What is the difference between the real notion of gvul and the concept of gvul? Meaning we're not saying, this is what we're not saying. To say that in Atzilus, that the Kelim cause that the Etzem Hadova becomes Mugbal. That the thing which is mislabish in the Kelim becomes Mamash Mugbal. That is the impact of the Kelim. The impact of the Kelim Atzilus is that the thing which is mislabish in those Kelim becomes Mugbal. actually mugbal. V'hagvul hu b'hechreichi. And when this term that the gvul, this aspect of finitude, of limitations that you'll find in the kelim would be hechreichi, would be necessary to its identity.
Like defining, basically.
Yeah, that's what it is. Not what it does, it's what it is. The oz shaykh kushi hanal to lo yitochin about this. If we were to say that the kelim of Atzilus were mamish magbil in a real sense, such that the thing which is mislabish b'seicham becomes a dover mugbal, and that gvul which it imposes is absolute and necessary, is contingent in a sense, is contingent on its relationship with the things that are mislabish in it. Then you'd have this good question: how can you have such a thing in Atzilus? Atzilus is the pshat, the maitzel is nimtza benetza, the bleak gvul of Eirin Seif is mislabish in Atzilus. So if there's going to be gvul there, then you have two things that are incompatible. However, when we talk about the gvul in Atzilus, this is not what we mean. The concept of gvul in Atzilus is that this is part of the Ratzon of Hashem, that there should be Hagbala. It goes to it's at the very core. It's the Yechelis of Hashem to do whatever He wants, and since Hashem wants that there, for whatever reason, that there should be Dafka 10, not 9, not 11. So you get, since that is the Ratzon of Hashem, it emanates from Hashem. This is what Hashem wants. So what do you mean? It's not a Bri Yesh Ma'ayin. It's inherent. It inheres to the Ratzon of Hashem. That what? That there should be a Chochmah. There should be a Chesed. So that is what the Gevul in Atzilus, what we're calling Gevul in Atzilus, is doing. It's enabling and it's realizing the Ratzon of Hashem. So what? So the nim. How's that then? So how's that change anything? The nimtza. So from this we can conclude Hagvul da Atzilus eine beginnes Gvul hechreichi kin koyach ein seif mamish el shu koychi be beginnas Hagvul.
It's not like the punchline, that's keichei.
Shu koychi be beginnas Hagvul. So here we're talking about figuring out what Atzilus does. It reveals the Eibishter's koyches, the Eibishter's yechelis. The Eibishter has a koyach b'gvul, and the Eibishter has a koyach b'gvul. Kolzman the b'gvul is dominant, is unplek, is revealed. Then the koyach ha'gvul is suppressed. It's unappreciated. It's unfulfilled. Through tzimtzumim, there can be the emergence of the Eibishter's koyach hagvul. But what is the Eibishter's koyach hagvul? The Eibishter's koyach hagvul is not a gvul hechreichi. It's not a rule. The Eibishter isn't mugbul in his koyach hagvul.
Famous question.
Yeah. The inyan of the Eibishter's koyach hagvul is not an inyan. So it says any bechinas gvul hechreichi. It's not like that. There's some things. There are limits to what they can and they cannot be. But when something isn't a result of what we call a gvul hechreichi, of an absolute, determined, necessary gvul, but rather an expression of the Eibishter's unlimited abilities, the Eibishter's shleimus, that he's both koyach b'gvul and koyach b'bli gvul, then that gvul is not of the same order, is not of the same character, not the same characteristics as the gvul that we talk about in Eilam Esbiyah. Zeu the isa b'sefi yitzira esa spheres blima midosan esa she'ein lahem seif chuli. So in the Sefer Yitzira it says ataka this esa spheres, but they're blima. They don't have any emes and hakbala. They might have a middle of esa, but they have ein lahem seif. So you have the sort of the nature of its hakbala is that it's a hakbala which reveals the bleakvul of the Eibishter. So the Rebbe Rashab says, "L'cheirin emuven." How on the one hand can you say it's 10, and how do you begin as midas a gevul, which suggests that there's a gevul. It's 10, it's not 11, it's not 9. Then how can you say it's not? It hasn't got a gevul. Has a gevul and hasn't got a gevul. How can you have a gevul and not have a gevul at the same time? Yeah. The explanation is the be'emes bechinas hakelim da'atzilus he magbilim esa'ir. We have to establish that the kelim do in fact cause a hagbala in the eir. The eir mitzad atzmai was not previously divided into these 10 categories, and through the hislapshus bekelim, the eir becomes divided into these 10 spheres. So that's one thing that we can't avoid. But the catch is like this. This limitation that the Kalim impose on the Eir, who make atzmus mamish. Where is this koyach hagbola from? This koyach hagbola is a giluy of the koyach hagvul of the Eibishter. Shmisham nimshach bechinas ha'eir. Misham nimshach gamkin hagbola lahagbil l'tzamtzim ha'eir. And this is very, important as a background, is to understand the B'yei Mashmini Atzeres Ranat, that even in the Eir Gufa, the Eir Gufa has a Koyach HaTzimtzum, a Koyach HaMidas Adin. The Koyach HaGvul is embedded in the Eir. Remember, I brought to you from the Tovshin Hay, the idea is both Eirs and Kelim are both Ruchni. What are we saying over here? That when we talk about Spheres, so we talk about Eiros, we talk about Kelim, according to the Ma'areches, the whole thing, you don't make a division. You don't say that there's a thing called Eiros and there's a thing called Kelim, and the Kelim are Magbil the Eir, and then you have this question. No, the Eiros themselves already have a Koyach HaTzimtzum and Koyach it's what we describe as Kelim is the realization of the Eir. This Koyach HaKamus, this Koyach Nelon, which is Niskala, is that the Eir which issues forth from Atom Ser and Seif is Nemsich from the Etzem. And the Etzem has Yechelis. And that Yechelis is Yechelis Bigvul and Yechelis Bligvul. And that Yechelis is in the Eir. And through Tzimtzumim, it's Niskala, this Koyach HaGvul Sheba Ein Seif. So it's like what we say in Vidaita Moskva. Ein Etzem Master Al Etzem. What type of Hagbala is this? The Eibush being Magbal himself. His Koyach HaGvul, his Koyach HaGvul, and it gets to a point where there's a Gilu, the Koyach HaGvul. But what is that Koyach HaGvul? So the Koyach HaGvul, why is there a Koyach HaGvul? Not because it's Mugbal. There's a Koyach HaGvul because it's Kol Yochel. So what's for Hagbala is this? So the whole question is, how, if there's going to be Hagbala, can you call it Atzilus? What do you mean? Why should you not be able to call it Atzilus? Shem sheyesh lekeich b'gvul, could be built by Gvul. Yesh lekeich b'gvul.
Is Hagbala also compared to our Hagbala? Is it Bligvul? Really? Because if it's from Hashem and it's part of Hashem, then
it's not being Magvul anything fundamentally.
So
to do what you want to do is not a Hagbala. The Ratzon of Hashem is there should be Esses Spheres. So if you want Esses Spheres, and you have Esses Spheres, it's for you a Hagbala. That's what you want. The Eibishter wanted Esser spheres. So the fact that it's nischalik into Esser spheres, what how's that Hagbola? So, and for this, I mean, I don't know if does it bring in the footnotes here? Does it bring the Derech Mitzvah?
Yeah.
Where?
Above the page before. Maslikus, for example.
No Hamonasalikus. The Bia to Veshavsa. And this is the Perk Rishon in the Maimah Bia for Shavsa in the back of the Derech Mitzvah in the Hisofis, or it's called the Hisofis, but definitely the sort of the ones that aren't on the actual mitzvahs, the extra Maimorim that it has at the end, the Bia Veshavsa. This is where he makes this point very clear, that it's not the Koyach HaGvul, it's the Koyach HaMagbil. And this is the moshel I think he's going to give now. No, it's not here. No, in my head I'm thinking of the Veshavsa, the Bia to the Veshavsa in Derech Mitzvah. It's worth learning over that ois, just the first ois, where he makes the clear distinction between Koyach HaGvul, which is what you would describe to be the matzav in Eilam Bia, and the Koyach HaMagbil, the ability to contain, which is a Koyach Bli Gvul. You can make endless Hagbolas. You can make endless Hagbolas is a Bli Gvul, Koyach Gvul.
Stan, we've just stated here that really the Koyach HaGvul of Hashem is of Hashem, and it's really Bli Gvul, right? You could say on the other hand though that even the Koyach Bli Gvul is Gvul, right?
Let's just stick with what we're saying here, though.
Is this all the Gabi like our perspective?
No.
Because couldn't you just say this? It's not really Hashem though.
What isn't?
I mean, even the Koyach Bli Gvul is not really Hashem. Isn't it also Gvul?
It's a Gilui of Hashem. It's Nishtalshul from Hashem. The Atmos Ein Sof is Nishtalshul in a manner where there's a Gilui of the Eira Bli Gvul. There's a Gilui of the Eira Gvul. The Eibusher is neither Gvul or Bli Gvul. It's L'mayl Mishneh. Right? But this, by including the Kalim as a Chelik of Atzilus, what that's doing is it's affirming the Koyach HaGvul Shebein Sof. This principle, this notion of the Koyach HaGvul Shebein Sof that we find in the Avodas HaKodesh, which is similar to the Shitta of the Ma'areches. Kshem sheli Koyach B'Gvul, Kshem sheyesh leKoyach B'Bilti Bagvul, Kach yesh leKoyach B'Gvul. Yeah? So the Yuvan Zal Derech Moshel B'Nefesh HaAdam. Let's see this in a moshel in the human experience. K'may Koyach HaChochma Shebenefesh. A person has Koyach HaChochma Shebenefesh. Sheyochel liyas yispashtas HaChochma Adim Sof. Person's Koyach HaChochma doesn't inherently have any Hagbolis. K'may be'eza pilpul omuk bisporis rabbis amukis ma'id ne'atiyas sichliyas ona va'ona. Take a inyan, a sugya, and you can have a pilpul, and it can go on and on and on in various different ways. It can be nated this way, nated that way. The pilpul will go on, and it won't end. That's because the concept can just, there are things that, there are sugyas that have been talked about for thousands of years. People are still koching sich in sugyas that, and I'm not just talking here about in sugyas of Torah and Kedusha, in any field of Haskalah. You have sugyas that people started talking about thousands of years ago. We have records, and people are still talking about it. Doesn't end. The debate doesn't end. It's inyan bli gvul. But inyan ha'agbola b'seichel, shad po yovei b'hagbola davke, to contain that seichel, such that you have a contained argument. Nikoyach ze nimshach me'etzim koyach ha'maskel shebenefesh, shemisham nimshach kol gilui ha'seichel. Sham yesh gam koyach ha'gvul. That capacity to restrict the sort of the nevias ha'seichel, to restrict the endless outpouring of ideas and associations with a particular sugya, that comes itself from the koyach ha'maskel. Just like the koyach hamaskil is the koyach of bligvul, of gilui, it also has the koyach of ha'akova, ha'atzara, of koyach ha'gvul. Hainu letzamtzum lahagdil kol svara. Elish benefesh hari gam ha'oir hu rak oir proti b'chinas chachma. V'atzimtzum hu lahagdil oifen hamshachosei v'spashtusei. So we see this in our human experience. You have koyches hanefesh, which, if you remember, our koyches hanefesh are a dugma b'chalal on the spheres of Atzilus, and the capacity to contain them, in a sense, like the avrei hanefesh, which enable the klei hanefesh, they enable that each svara should be able to come out contained, compact, and clear, going in one direction, and be a solid argument. That is all part of the koyach hamaskil. The koyach hamaskil is not just exclusively the inyan of gilui, the inyan of bligvul. Gilui and bligvul is what we're associating here, of outpouring of the ideas. It's also the containing of the idea, and this is this is all of the the arguments in Talmud Ben Chanukah, Vidaita Moskva, about Havayna Lakim and all these types of things. That the things aren't inherently contradicting because they all emanate from the same moket. The Koyach HaGvul and the Koyach HaBligvul come from the same place. And in some ways, you could even argue the Koyach HaGvul is noch tiefer. Yeah. Ach HaDugm is a Yuvan Lamayla bebechinas Atzilus. The bechinas Atmos HaMatzil shenimshach misham bechinas Eira Atzilus Hainu koyach hagilui, hari yesh boi gamkin koyach hagvul vu heder hagilui. The very thing that emanates from the matzil, from Atzmos Ein Sof, which ultimately through Kamen Tzimtzumim becomes the Eir of Atzilus, is not just the koyach hagilui. Contained within it is also the koyach hagvul, which is the heder hagilui. ומisham nimshach ha'akova v'hagbola b'hashefa ha'nimshach liyas ba'ofen kozeh u'kozeh davke. And it's from there that comes this capacity for the gilui to be controlled and contained and delimited. ומזה נעשה בכינס חוכמה וחסד חולי באצילus על ידי הכלים שמגבילים ומצמצמים את העיר. So you ultimately get to the context and the situation where you have the Eir Atzilus, which is mislabish in the kelim of Atzilus, and through that you have this tzimtzum and hakbola to enable there should be eses viris. V'hu mikeach ha'atzmus mamish b'chinas mekeir hagilui. So this unfolding of the Eir, this emanation of this Eir, is that it reveals the koyach hagvul shebe'ein sof together with the koyach habligvul, the koyach hagilui with the koyach hahelem. Yeah, you can use whatever terms you want. It's the same sugya. Ulafizem movin. The bechinas hakelim shemagbilim es ha'eir heim bechinas ein sof mamish. Those kelim which bring about the hagbala in the eir, so it should be eses firis, are themselves ein sof. They are also atzilus. Buhu sheniskala koyach hakomus the bechinas eses firis hagnuzos b'ma'atzilon. Okay, so he brings in this inyan of eses firis hagnuzos b'ma'atzilon. But what is it that, as we were saying before about this inyan of ishtalshlus, that even if they are tzimtzum, there was already a mokir for the eses firis as they are in atzilus, and that's what we call the eses firis hagnuzos b'ma'atzilon. So the oiris and kalim of atzilus are also ein sof udvukim yuchadim by, and still attached to their sheidush mokir. But zeu inyan atzilus shuhu loshin yetzel miloshin etzli v'samach. So, when we say the term Atzilus, we're implying that the thing is Eitzel and Samuch, it's close and associated, and what he's trying to say here is Dvukim Umyuchadim. You have the inyan of Iyu v'chayu v'gamu ichad. The K'moisha Eishu b'chinas hagilu dovuk be'ein soif, just like any oir, What is the gather of Eir? Eir is Me'ein HaMoir, it's Dovek in the Ma'ir. So the Eir is understandably Dovek Be'ein Sof, K'may Kein HaKli, Dovek Be'ein Sof. The Kli is also Dovek Be'ein Sof, because the Kli is also an Eir. It's just an Eir HaGvul, or the Koyach HaGvul Shebe'eir. The Kli, it's the type of Kli, is the Koyach HaGvul Shebe'eir. It's just as Dovek in the Ein Sof as the Koyach HaBli Gvul. The Koyach HaGilui, which we call Eir, and the Koyach HaHelam, which we call Keli, are both Dovek in the Ein Sof. Why? Because in the Ein Sof, Atmas Ein Sof, there is the Koyach HaGvul and the Koyach HaBli Gvul. Shayu Gamkin bechinas Ein Sof Mamish, Elish u bechinas Koyach HaMagbul Shebe Ein Sof. Chuli Kana. Use the term Magbul. This is why I wanted to look up the Tzemach Tzedek in the Biyad of Shavsa in Derech Mesisecha. V'yisavusam, v'yiskalusam, hu alidei hatzimtzum k'mei ha'oir, chuli k'mei shispoil ha'kamon. Now we're going to explain later, a lot later, the emergence of the Kalim, which is the Koyach HaHelam Sheba Ein Sof, comes about through Tzimtzumim, just like the Koyach HaGilui has to come about through Tzimtzumim. If you remember from the Ranat, in order to get the Eir HaKav, the Koyach HaGilui Sheba Ein Sof, it also has to come through Tzimtzumim. The Gabi, the Ein Sof Shifnei HaTzimtzum, the Eir HaKav is already an union of Yeshus, Kimat. Because it hasn't got the ultimate bittul and vekus like the Ein Sof Shifnei HaTzimtzum, so you have to have Tzimtzumim. So, when we think about Eiris and what we're getting from this Ma'areches, when we think about the Eiris and Kelim Atzilus, you have to think about it. These are two Koyachos of Elikus. There's a Koyach HaGilui and Koyach HaHelam, Koyach HaBli Gvul, Koyach HaGvul. And as such, there's not they're both Atzilus. And it's not stir, it's not a problem, because it's not Gvul Mamish. It's the Koyach HaGvul. It's the Koyach HaMagbul. ולפי זה מובן, בבחינת הכלים בעצם, הם בלי גבול, אחרים בבחינת אין סוף ממש. And when we say the term bli gvul here, we don't mean that they're bli gvul like the koyach bli gvul. They're bli gvul in the sense of the ein sof shebadava. They're bli gvul in the sense that they're ultimately only what the Eibishter is. Ube'ein sof baruch hu gam koyach hagvul sheboyu ein sof. We talk about the Eibishter ein sof. It's the union of shleimus. So koyach hagvul is also part of his shleimus. It's not mugbul. We're not talking about bli gvul in relation to gvul. This you see in the Rebbe's Maimarim, Ba'arichus and Ba'ad Gosha. This Indian, you talk about gvul, you talk about bli gvul, but then you can talk about bli gvul amiti. Bli gvul amiti is that which transcends the distinction between gvul and bli gvul. So when we're talking about the bli gvul of the Eir, we're not talking about bli gvul amiti. And also, in a similar sense, when we're talking about the Gvul Shabbat, we're not talking about Gvul Hamiti. Both of them are terms relative to each other. And it's because the Eibush is Bli Gvul Hamiti, he has the Koyach of Gvul and he has the Koyach of Bli Gvul. Soine Loima, the Inyan Neisa, Inyan the Gvul of Bli Gvul Chuli Vadal. Right? Bli Gvul Ba'emes is the Pshat that it transcends, it sort of, it moves, it's beyond the notions of gvul and bli gvul. Ela shepu'ulasam sheyumshach hashefa b'gvul the pu'ula, what is the pu'ula of these kalim, is that the shefa, the ashpos, the likus, should be nimshach b'gvul. They are the koyach hamagdil. Amnam heim atzmon bli gvul. They themselves are bli gvul. So again, if you look in the Samach Tzedek, like I told you, you'll see that this koyach of being magdil, every single person has it too. He gives the example that, if I remember rightly, I haven't looked up recently, he gives the example of writing, I think, that in order to write, for the koyach hatnur shebiyad to be able to produce letters, the letters have to be mugbal, eisius mugbalim, right? You actually write a physical manifestation of letters through you're producing letters on the page. But your koach hamagbel, your capacity to be magbel, the tnuis hayad, is bligvul. Even if the product, the outcome, the hashpah, which is nimshach begvul. So you don't if you're not magbel your letters, it can be all over the place. And you write like a child, right? But the koach hamagbel to produce letters, that's bligvul. I think they give many more. He gives other dugmois as well over there, if I remember rightly. Ulazais. The outcome of the impact of the Kalim of Atzilus. We find in the Ilamis Biyah where you see Gvul Mamish. You don't have the imposition of actual Gvul. The Inyan Hakbalosan Hu Rakma Shezeh Chochma V'zeh Chesed. What is the nature of the Hakbala? The Hakbala is that this Eir will be Eirach, this Eir will become Chesed, and this Eir will become Chochma. Alnam his Pashtusim Hu Adin Seif Mamish. But it doesn't restrict the Bli Gvul of Chochma or the Bli Gvul of Chesed. K'mei HaChochma hi b'chinas Bli Gvul v'chein HaChesed. Each of the Sfiras Nazilis, the Eir is Bli Gvul. It's just Bli Gvul as Chochma, Bli Gvul as Chesed. But that Hakbala of being Chochma and being Chesed is not really Hakbala. That's what it means in the Sefer Yitzira when it says they may be numbered as 10, but they're Bli Gvul. Hainu she'im bebechinas mida ugvul. B'uli yes Chochma v'Chesed. But since that Gvul is not Gvul Mamish, it's the Gvul which is the Gilui of the Eibishter's Koyach HaGvul, which is also Bli Gvul. But Adarabba, not only is it also, it's not Bli Gvul like the Eretz Bli Gvul. Once you have the Eretz and the Kalim, what is it Megala? It's Megala the Bli Gvul Amiti of Atmas Ein Sof, where there isn't a stira between the two. How did the Eretz and Kalim come together? Because the whole pshat about how it's all viable is because they're all mushrish and Atmas Ein Sof. Since they're mushrish and Atmas, so through the Kalim, not only is it not Mailim or Master, not only is it not Magbil, in any true sense, it's Megala, how the whole thing from top to bottom is an expression of Atmas Ein Sof. If there would only be this pashtus of the Koach HaBli Gvul Shebein Sof, you could erroneously think that there is Taka Hakbala on Atmas Ein Sof. It's only his Koach is only Bli Gvul. You'd have a limited understanding. You'd have a limited appreciation of the shleimus, of the perfection of Atmas Ein Sof. Dafka through the Hakbala of the Kalim, the so-called Hakbala of the Kalim, you're Megala the Bli Gvul of Atmas Ein Sof. Sai Koach HaGvul, Sai Koach HaBli Gvul. So it doesn't in any way function as a Helen V'Hester, or we call it Helen V'Hester, or a Hakbala on the Ispashtus of Ein Sof. Yeah? Well, if we are now moving the Hakelim in Bechinas Elikus Mamish, so now it's understood how in fact the Kelim are also Elikus, not just the Eir. Shehem Bechinas Atzilus Gilu Yahelim Bechinas Eses Firs Agnuzis Matzila. The Kelim are just as much a Gilu Yahelim with the Eses Firs Agnuzis Matzilon, the Eses Firs Shlifnei Tzimtzum, as the Eiris. Shekva Yisham Behelim Bechinas Ischalkus Shu Bechinas Koach HaGvul. Because already in the Eiris Shlifnei Tzimtzum there is the it's Nichlol, this notion of Gvul. That's why we call it Eses Firs Agnuzis. Still called Eses Firs. El Shamu Bechinas Pshitas Ein Sof V'lo Bechinas Chalkus Mamish Chas V'Shalom. there's even a more edler oifen. You can't compare the Ischalkus of the Esferis Vatzilus to the Ischalkus of the Esferis Agnuzim Matzilon. There it's everything's been in even of Pshitas. Kumei Aderech Moshel Esekeiches HaNefesh HaKlulim Be'etzim HaNefesh. Afal Pikein HaNefesh Hu Etzem Echad Ruchni Poshut Kumei Shekos B'Seif Shabbein Peknon Aleph, like that was our first hagaha, and we referred to the Seif Shabbein Peknon Aleph, where it says this quote, HaNefesh Hu Etzem Echad Ruchni Poshut. But nevertheless, Nichlal Boy Esekeiches HaNefesh. Esekeiches HaNefesh are klulim be'etzem HaNefesh. The Esekeiches HaNefesh, just like we were talking about how the Eir is and the Kelim, the Eir in Seif Bechlal is nishtalshul. It's not. There's no briyesh ma'ayin of the Eir. There's no briyesh ma'ayin of the Keiches HaNefesh. Keiches HaNefesh not beschadshus from the Nefesh. They're klulim be'etzem HaNefesh. So even though the nefesh is itself an etzem echad ruchni poshut, just like Asmas Erin Seif is etzem echad ruchni poshut, but still, it's koil in it these inyonim which in iskalim min hahelim el agilui in the Eris and Kelim Atzilus and in the Keiches HaNefesh. So if it's the case in the nefesh, that you can have eser Keiches HaNefesh klulim be'etzem HaNefesh, notwithstanding the fact that the etzem HaNefesh is etzem echad ruchni poshut. So mikoshik in the maila. How much more so is that? Can you say so the maila? The av sheklulim b'yasas firois mikomokim uchad mamish. If the keiches hanefesh sheklulim b'etzem hanefesh become part of the pshitas hanefesh, how much more so the esas firois aknuzas ma'atzilon are chad mamish with the with their mokim. Vispashtus ha'aroson, idea tzimtzum, u'mokim ponoi, b'chinas malchus, sheb eses v'ugnuzais, hu ba'atzilus, shebo b'chinas ischalkus begilu. So what happens? You have the esves agnuz ma'atzilon, which are in a state of pshitas ein seif, but through the tzimtzum, through the mokim ponoi, which impacts what? The malchus of the esves agnuzais, the lowest malchus the ein seif, the lowest madrega of the Esrei Agnuzis, where you have the impact of the Tzimtzum Arishain. From there emerges in Atzilus the emissaries Chalkus of the Esrei in the Eris and the Kelim. The emissaries Chalkus. We're still talking about his Chalkus in the Eifim, which is Chad Mamish. Ushniskala bechinas koyach hagvul shebein soif udvukim uyichodim heim b'mekelim. Whilst there is a gil of the koyach hagvul, in a much more in an incomparably more substantive way than it emerges as part of the Esespheres Agnuz. The Esespheres Agnuz Matzilon is just an Efshorius. It's still in the any of Pashat. Everything is dominated by the Eira Bligvul. The Eira Gvul is completely overwhelmed and overshadowed by the Keich HaBligvul. But ultimately, through the many Tzimtzumim, it's viable that you can have the emergence of the Koyach HaGvul Shebe'ein Seif. But at the same time, it's all still Dovukum Yuchad the Mokim. Still Iyu V'chayu Ichad, Iyu V'gamu Ichad. And that's what we have to understand when we talk about the Gvul and the Ischalkus of the spheres of Atzilus. We're not talking about Gvul Mamish. We're talking about the revealing the Koyach HaGvul Shebe'ein Seif. So everything that happens in Atzilus, according to the Ma'areches, is a gilui min hahelim of the keiches of Atmas Ein Seif, the keich habligmu and the keich hagvul, the keich hagilui and the keich hahelim. Okay, so that's the first shitta Ma'areches, and next time, Be'ez Hashem, we'll move on to the shitta of Reb Menachem Rekanti, next paragraph.